Right, so the numbers out of Alberta are a little bit better. 82 new cases yesterday, 704 active, so they went up by like two. Hospitalization numbers are up a little bit though, up to 64. ICU is the same, no new deaths. But again, the one thing to keep in mind with the numbers now is that they're probably inflated to a degree. Canada, we don't have as many cases, but we have multiple cases out of the states showing the numbers, both the case numbers and the death numbers are inflated. And again, these are people that have just flat out admitted it. It's not conspiracy theory or any of that garbage. They just flat out admit it. Yeah, our numbers are inflated. So again, that's something you have to keep in mind that when you see these numbers, they're probably inflated to some degree. How much? That's hard to know. But again, you've seen the numbers out of Florida with the one hospital literally reporting 10 times the active cases that they were actually getting. So again, it's not like it's 10% or some massive amount in Florida. It's literally 10 times. So again, the all the people that are all worried about this kind of stuff, it's not based in any real reality, and most of their solutions to the problems will only make the problems worse long term. The only solution to this problem is how can we keep things open and keep everything going while still taking some precautions. And again, forcing people to wear masks isn't a precaution. Again, there's many negatives to wearing a mask, and again, there's no point in wearing a mask if you're healthy and not sick to begin with. There's no point. It only negatively affects you if you're healthy. And I think a problem that we're going to see is that going into next winter, we're going to have a lot of people with poor immune systems that are going to be more susceptible to getting sick, to dying from the flu, to dying from this, from dying from anything for that matter. And everyone's going to like, oh, see, I told you we should have locked down, we should have forced everyone to wear masks and all this garbage. When the reality is that the cause of this was still again because of government mismanagement. So that's something I wanted to bring up. Again, the numbers out of the states are pretty high yesterday as far as cases go, but again, you have to keep in mind and take with a grain of salt that these numbers are inflated. I don't know if they're going to go about fixing the inflated numbers or not, but again, we know they're inflated. I've heard multiple cases about people who went to go get testing or went to go get tested, didn't end up going to get tested, and still got told they tested positive. Stuff like what we've seen out of Florida. So again, the case numbers are most definitely inflated to a degree. Again, the deaths, they're actually right at about 1,001. So they went over 1,000 by one for the first time in over a month now. Again, not a good sign, but again, it's still not a huge number. I mean, you look at compared to the numbers in April and May, they're way higher than they were now. And again, we don't even know if those numbers are 100% accurate either. So that's the other thing. So the big news out of yesterday was the block leader. I don't like trying to pronounce those kind of names. Um, was accused of sexual assault or sexual misconduct. I don't even know what the exact allegations were, but basically, in a nutshell, I don't buy it. Like I really don't buy it. And again, I have every reason to personally to hate the guy. Like I mean, he's the leader of the block. But again, I don't believe it for 1 second. And I think the reality is that um, like Spencer Fernando points out here, he says, I'm sure it's a total coincidence that CBC is running this story days after Blanchette called Trudeau to step aside as PM. Totally random, totally coincidental. No, again, it's too much of a coincidence. Like again, this guy literally holds the power to sway the decisions of a lot of decisions to happen in Parliament, right? Because they have the power to put the Liberals in a majority or a minority. I mean, I think the NDP does too, but this guy, again, this guy has a lot of political power. I mean, aside from Trudeau and some of the higher up Liberals, he's one of the most powerful Canadian politicians out there. And if you were going to make this allegation, why wait until now? Like, this is literally about as random as you can possibly be. Like, you're not going to do it like last election or the election before. Like, if anything, that was the time to do it. I mean, look at Trudeau in blackface. Like, look at all these. I mean, a lot of these other allegations are clearly false as well on both sides. But again, people usually do it right before elections, right? Because they want to, most of the time, they just want to sway the decision of the public. It's most of the time, it's not actually real allegations. I mean, you look at Kavanaugh and all the stuff with Trump and all that garbage. Again, complete none of those, any evidence whatsoever to back any of that stuff up. And from what I've seen, there's no evidence to back this up either. So again, I think this is just a completely unfair attack on the bloc leader. And now again, I completely disagree with them in pretty much every way, shape, and form. I mean, they're big on environmentalism and all this leftist garbage, but again, they're perfectly fine with taking Alberta's money. So again, it's have every reason to hate the guy, but there's plenty of legitimate reasons to be critical of these kind of people. So again, if you need to be, if the best thing that you can come up with is stuff that's made up, then you're probably not, you probably don't have a good case to be made. I mean, it's the same stuff with Trump too. Most of the stuff that they used to attack him is completely made up and BS. So yeah, it's something I wanted to bring up because I think it's too much of a coincidence, right? Like again, when you're trying to figure out what the cause of this kind of stuff, you talk about, okay, what is the simple solution? And the simple solution is um, he just called for Trudeau to step down like a couple days ago. So of course, I think there's too much of a coincidence, basically, in a nutshell. This is from Larry Elder, and he links to a story where a young mother was shot in the head for saying all lives matter. Now, again, this is what I've been talking about, that people are going to be killed. Now, again, this is the other thing, too, when it comes to Black Lives Matter, is you can't even disagree with them in the slightest, and they kill you. It's not that they disagree with you or even hate your guts. They kill you. And this is where we're headed as a society, is if rationality doesn't prevail, we're going to end up where the anti-racists are going to be the people that are being most attacked, because the reality is that the Black Lives Matter crowd, and this obviously isn't everybody in there, there's probably a lot of well-meaning people, but at the top, they're black supremacists. I mean, they've admitted they're communists. Like, they don't care about racial justice. Like, if they cared about racial justice, why are they destroying their own neighborhoods? Why are they destroying businesses within their neighborhoods? Again, why are they tearing down statues of people who fought against slavery? Again, like, why are they tearing down statues of people who fought against the Nazis? Like, again, they're not anti. I mean, again, like I've mentioned a million times too, is that these crazy leftist organizations, they're very clever and cunning with the way they use language, and that they always name themselves, anti-fascists and Black Lives Matter, and they frame it in a sense that, oh, if you're critical of us in any way, shape, or form, that must mean that you don't think Black Lives Matter. You're a fascist if you disagree with Antifa, right? Like, that's how they do it, and the reason that they do that is because um, if you actually debated them, and if they actually had to debate you, they would lose, because again, Black Lives Matter are, they're just communists who are, a lot of them, especially at the top, are black supremacists. They don't care about racial inequity, or I mean, they care to an extent, but the reality is that they want communism. Again, that's the main goal. And the reason why they're going after whites so much is, again, whites are the race that least wants these far left ideologies, so that's why they're constantly going after white people. This is from Derek Sloan. Now, again, the conservative leadership race, I don't know when the exact date is for the vote, but I mean, I'm not going to be voting. Um, but as far as I can tell, Derek Sloan's the best candidate. Um, I do think, like I've mentioned in videos in the past, that Canada is going to end up socialist if the Liberals don't get voted out. Now, does that, I mean, like I say, in an ideal world, Alberta just gets the hell out of Canada, but I don't know how realistic that is. The most realistic solution may be to get in a actual conservative. And again, you can debate all you want about how unlikely that is, which I agree with to an extent. But the reality is, again, is um, Wexit is still largely unlikely, not because you couldn't get a majority of people to support it. I don't think that's the cause. I think the cause is the mainstream media would spend day and night attacking the movement. It would be viciously attacked as being racist and sexist and all the usual garbage. And the problem is most of the people would fall for it. And the reality is too is that you may be more likely to just get a good actual conservative in there, or even someone who isn't a far leftist. Again, like we're at the point to where um, the reality is, like I say, is that we're going to end up with socialism, which is going to end up in communism, which is going to end up with massive amounts of people dying if we don't get the far left out of parliament. And Sloan, I think, is about as close to a actual conservative as you can find. Now, again, things may change. We may have to wait till next election too. You don't know where people's hearts really lie until the election comes along. But again, he's talked very good on guns. He's talking about defunding the WHO. He's got to be against the carbon tax, but I haven't heard his official position on that. But just the fact that he's the most pro-gun candidate, again, that's something that's enough, probably enough to sway my mind. It's probably enough to sway a lot of people's minds. And if he wants to defund the WHO too, like why in the world would you not get on board here? But again, um, there is still a ways to go, but I mean, the main point being is that I think in order of the least, the best candidates to the worst, I think that the worst is definitely Mackay. I think he's even more. He literally is a liberal, like a '90s liberal, even a 2000s liberal. Like, I don't know where actually how why he actually considers himself a conservative. Like, I'm still trying to figure that out. O'Toole is so. I mean, I think he's a little bit better than Shear from what I can tell, but still not quite where I would have him or where I would want him to be. But the good news is that he is probably the most likely to win um, a general election. And then you have Lewis, who's a bit of a wild card, some for obvious reasons, some for not. And that number one, she's not quite as well known as the other candidates, at least from what I can tell. But the one thing that she would have on all the other ones is number one, she's not white, and number two, she's not a man. So that is one of the things that the liberals and the left as a whole seems to use to win elections is to constantly accuse the conservatives of being racist and sexist. And I mean, they'll still do it. Mark my words, if Lewis still wins, they'll still do it. Um, but it doesn't look nearly as good and plausible to the average person because you're calling a black woman, a party who's run by a black woman, racist and sexist, um, when your party is run by a white man who wore blackface multiple times. Like again, that doesn't really. I don't see. I mean, a lot of people still believe that. I mean, most of these leftists probably still would believe that, but it's kind of hard to make that work. Like if you know what I mean. But the last thing I wanted to talk about here is again, this is something I brought up before, but it's very important for people looking at these numbers out of the states and. This guy on Twitter says, I don't even want to pronounce, try and figure out what that name is, but 45 out of the 50 governors didn't force virus patients into nursing homes. The five that did were Cuomo, New York, Wolf, Pennsylvania, Murphy, New Jersey, he spelled that wrong, but Newsom, California, and Whitmer too. He spelled it. Must have been an autocorrect, but of Michigan. And they're almost 40% of the virus deaths. Now, again, those are some of the more populous states, but again, I don't think that they're still even about 40% of the population. So, I mean, Texas and Florida, I believe, are the second and third most populous. Um, but that is kind of where things are at too. That the reality is in the states that the reality is, I guess, is that the vast majority of the deaths came from very small pockets. And the idea of this whole one size fits all garbage that most of these people, and especially the leftists, are supporting, it doesn't make any sense. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, some of these states that were very hardly even hit, they shouldn't even have barely missed a beat. So that's something I wanted to point out because, again, people think that, oh, it's countrywide and all this garbage, but the reality is that it isn't. Like again, too, you have these Canadians that are all up in arms about Americans coming here, which I understand to a degree, but the reality is that someone coming on holidays to Canada from rural Montana or Idaho is no more likely and probably less likely than someone from Edmonton or Calgary uh, to have the virus and spread it, right? Like it doesn't make any sense from that. Now, I don't think you could have a system so where it says, yeah, if you're from a state that, especially a rural area, I don't think you could have a policy like that. But I'm just pointing out a fact that I don't think a lot of people are thinking about. So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about as far as today goes. If you liked the video, make sure to hit that like and subscribe. Check out my PayPal and email. I got linked in the description. Again, I appreciate any donations, but at the very least, just hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. And last few things, check me out on Parlay, BitChute, and Twitter. If you haven't followed me on those other platforms, make sure you check those out in the links.